"Mom, we've been talking and have agreed it's best for you to step aside. It was a difficult decision for us to make, but I'm sure you'll agree it's what's best for the family." The words sliced through the warm celebration atmosphere of Romano's bistro like ice water on a campfire. My son Michael stood before me with his wife Jessica at his side, both wearing expressions of rehearsed concern. Around us, the restaurant I had built from nothing buzzed with 25 years of memories, 3 generations of customers celebrating our anniversary milestone. My hands went cold around my wine glass. 25 years of 16-hour days, of building this place from a struggling food truck into the heart of our neighborhood, and my son was discussing my removal like a corporate restructuring. "Look at the bright side," Michael continued, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "You'll have more time to dedicate to yourself and do stuff. As if my life's work was some hobby I'd been indulging between more important activities. "It's time to let us take over," Michael said, settling back with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "We know you'll understand." The condescension was breathtaking. Here, in the dining room where I had served his first solid food, celebrated his graduation, his wedding, he was speaking to me like a child who needed guidance toward her own obsolescence. Jessica leaned forward, her blonde hair catching the candlelight. "Elena, we've researched best practices for family business transitions. You've worked so hard, don't you think you deserve to relax?" The phrase felt polished by repetition. I wondered how many times they had practiced this conversation, rehearsed my expected gratitude. Father Giuseppe paused his conversation, clearly picking up tension. Sophia, my assistant manager, had moved closer under the pretense of clearing tables, her worried frown deepening. "The restaurant industry has completely changed," Michael continued, showing me a detailed presentation on his phone. "We need digital marketing, social media presence, modernized systems. You've built something incredible, but maintaining tradition isn't ensuring profitability." His MBA vocabulary felt cold in our intimate dining room. He kept saying "we" as if his authority were established, my agreement a mere formality. "We've developed a transition timeline," Jessica added, swiping through slides. "Michael's been working with a consultant to optimize revenue streams." I scrolled through charts about industry trends and competitor analysis. Impressive, thorough, and completely disconnected from reality. It spoke of brand positioning, but nothing about Mrs. Torino's standing order for her late husband's favorite dish. Nothing about quietly comping meals for the Castellas during their son's cancer treatment. "How long have you been working on this?" I asked, handing the phone back. Michael and Jessica exchanged a quick glance, the first crack in their performance. "Several months," Michael said carefully. "We wanted to be prepared when the right moment presented itself." Several months. While I planned tonight's celebration, they had been planning my professional funeral. "Well," I said, raising my wine glass with a smile, "I appreciate you thinking of my welfare. This is unexpected." Relief washed over their faces. They had prepared for tears, arguments, everything except gracious acceptance. Sophia appeared beside our table, ostensibly refilling water but seeking reassurance. 25 years had created telepathic understanding between us. Her questioning eyes asked what I couldn't yet answer. "We'll handle all transition details professionally," Jessica assured me, interpreting my calm as agreement. "We understand there will be an adjustment period." The phrase reduced my partnership with Sophia to a minor logistical challenge. I thought about the night she called sobbing about her son's surgery bills, how I quietly arranged funds without expecting repayment. What they didn't realize was that their presentation had revealed everything. How long they'd been planning this, how systematically they'd excluded me, how completely they misunderstood what they were trying to claim. Most importantly, they had no idea what legal documents I'd been reviewing since accidentally overhearing Michael discuss operational control weeks ago. As I smiled and accepted their vision of my retirement, I was calculating exactly how many signatures they'd need to make their plans legally possible. It was going to be an interesting conversation. The next morning, I arrived at Romano's 2 hours before opening, as I had for 25 years. The familiar ritual of unlocking the front door, disarming the alarm, switching on the kitchen lights. Everything felt different now, charged with new meaning. I made coffee and sat in the office that had been my sanctuary through every crisis. The walls displayed framed reviews, community awards, photos spanning decades of celebrations. Now I wondered, how long had Michael and Jessica been sitting in this same chair, planning my removal? My phone buzzed, a text from Sophia. "Can we talk? Something's been bothering me." She arrived 15 minutes later, her usually composed demeanor fractured with obvious distress. "Elena, I need to tell you something," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Last month, when I stayed late to finish inventory, I heard Michael and Jessica in here with someone I didn't recognize. They were talking about transition timelines and operational restructuring." My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "What exactly did you hear?" Michael was saying things like, "She's been resistant to modernization, and we need to position this as what's best for her health." The other person, a man in a suit, was taking notes and asking about your emotional attachment to daily operations. A consultant. They had hired a professional to strategize my removal. "There's more," Sophia continued, her voice dropping. "Last week, Jessica asked me detailed questions about supplier contracts, staff scheduling, our relationship with the health department. She framed it as learning the business, but now it looked like intelligence gathering. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, not panic but razor-sharp focus. "Sophia, I need you to think carefully. Have they asked about any legal documents, permits, licenses, anything like that?" Her eyes widened. "Actually, yes. Michael asked me where we keep all the boring paperwork. I told him you handle everything important in your personal files." Of course, they assumed the paperwork was boring. For 25 years, Michael had watched me handle permits, renewals, compliance documents, supplier agreements, the invisible foundation that kept Romano's legally operational. To him, it was administrative busywork his mother obsessed over. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in months. "David, it's Elena Rodriguez. I need to schedule an appointment today if possible." David Morales had been handling Romano's legal needs since we expanded from the food truck. A small practice attorney who understood family businesses, he had guided us through every major decision, every contract negotiation, every permit renewal. 2 hours later, I sat in his modest office while he reviewed a thick folder I'd brought from my personal files. "Elena, I have to ask, do Michael and Jessica understand the legal structure here?" David's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the concern underneath. "I don't think they've ever asked," I admitted. "They seem to assume that working in the business means understanding how it's owned." David spread several documents across his desk. "The building lease is in your name personally, not the business. The liquor license requires your personal signature for any transfers. Your supplier contracts with the specialty distributors include personal guarantee clauses that can't be assigned without your written consent." Each document told the same story. Romano's Bistro existed because Elena Rodriguez personally guaranteed its legal foundation. "Most importantly," David continued, pulling out a document I had signed years ago and forgotten, "when you incorporated the business, you retained 100% ownership. Michael and Jessica are employees with no equity stake." I stared at the incorporation papers, remembering the day I had filed them. Antonio had just died, the kids were teenagers, and I was desperate to protect the business from any future complications. The lawyer had suggested keeping full ownership for simplicity, until I decided how to structure succession. I had never gotten around to changing it. "David, what happens if they try to operate without my involvement?" His smile was grim. "They'd be in violation of multiple agreements within 30 days. The building lease alone would terminate. The health department permits require the owner's personal compliance certification." As I drove back to Romano's, pieces clicked into place. Michael and Jessica's confidence wasn't just arrogance, it was ignorance. They genuinely believed that working in the restaurant meant they had legal claim to it. Tonight, I would discover exactly how deep their assumptions went. That evening, after the last customer left and Sophia finished cleaning the kitchen, I locked the front door and climbed the stairs to my private office. The building that housed Romano's Bistro had been in my family for 3 generations, passed down through a carefully planned inheritance that Michael and Jessica had never bothered to understand. I pulled out the fireproof filing cabinet I'd maintained meticulously for 25 years, the same obsessive paperwork Michael had always mocked. Inside lay the foundation of everything they thought they could simply take. The building deed, transferred to my name when my grandmother Rosa died 6 months before I married Antonio. She had been adamant. "Elena, men assume they own whatever they can see. Smart women make sure the law says different." I had been 28, planning a wedding, dreaming of building a family. The legal technicalities seemed unimportant then. Now, 30 years later, my grandmother's wisdom felt prophetic. The original business license, filed in my name alone when we expanded from the food truck. Antonio had been traveling for his construction job, so I had handled all the paperwork. "Just put it in your name for now," he had said. "We can change it later if we need to." We never had. The liquor license, renewed annually for 25 years with my personal signature, my personal liability, my personal guarantee. State law required the license holder to be physically present for compliance inspections, to personally sign off on staff training, to maintain direct oversight of all alcohol service. The supplier contracts with Romano's specialized distributors, relationships I had built over decades of personal interaction. Giuseppe's Imports trusted Elena Rodriguez, not Romano's Bistro. When they extended credit during lean months, they looked at my personal creditworthiness, my handshake, my 20-year track record of keeping promises. Most revealing were the insurance policies, commercial liability, workers' compensation, fire and flood coverage, all naming me as the sole policyholder. After the flood that destroyed our original location, the insurance company had paid the settlement directly to Elena Rodriguez, requiring my personal endorsement on every check. I spread the documents across my desk like a legal puzzle. Every piece told the same story. Romano's Bistro existed because Elena Rodriguez personally guaranteed its foundation at every level. My phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, Jessica and I were talking, and we wanted to discuss timeline details. When would be good for you to start stepping back?" I could hear the eagerness in his voice, barely contained excitement about assuming control. "Michael, before we discuss timelines, I'm curious about something. Have you reviewed the legal requirements for restaurant ownership transfer?" A pause. "Legal requirements? I mean, it's a family business. You're just reducing your involvement, right?" "Well, there are permits, licenses, various compliance issues. Have you looked into any of that?" "Mom, you're overthinking this. We're not changing ownership, just management responsibilities. The business will keep running exactly the same." I almost smiled at his confidence. "I see. And you've confirmed this with the health department, the liquor licensing board, the building management company?" Another pause, longer this time. "Those are just administrative details. We can handle all that." "Of course," I said gently. "I'm sure you can. Should we meet tomorrow morning to go over the specifics?" Actually, we were hoping to announce the transition to the staff by Friday, get everyone excited about the new direction. Friday. 4 days to completely restructure a business they didn't legally understand. "That sounds ambitious," I replied. "Let's definitely meet tomorrow. Say, 9 o'clock? After ending the call, I returned to my documents. Each contract, each license, each permit told the same story. Romano's Bistro was Elena Rodriguez, and Elena Rodriguez was Romano's Bistro. They weren't separate entities that could be casually transferred between family members. I thought about tomorrow's meeting, about the moment when Michael and Jessica would discover that their administrative details were actually the legal foundation of everything they wanted to control. 25 years of careful documentation was about to reveal exactly who owned what in this family business. At 8:30 the next morning, I arranged the documents across the main dining room table, where Michael and Jessica would sit for our meeting. Not my cramped office where they might feel cornered, but the open dining room where Romanos had hosted thousands of family celebrations, including their own wedding reception. Each folder contained a different aspect of their legal ignorance: building ownership documents, business and corporation papers, liquor licensing requirements, health department permits, supplier contract terms, insurance policy conditions. 25 years of careful record-keeping, organized with the same attention to detail that had kept Romano's profitable through recessions, floods, and a pandemic. Sophia arrived early, as always, and found me arranging papers with methodical precision. "Elena, you look like you're preparing for battle," she said, setting down her coffee. "More like preparing for education," I replied. "Sophia, I need you to witness this conversation. Michael and Jessica have some misconceptions about how this business operates." At exactly 9 o'clock, they walked through the front door with matching expressions of barely contained excitement. Jessica carried a leather portfolio stuffed with their transition documents. Michael wore his most professional suit, clearly expecting to formalize his ascension to restaurant ownership. "Good morning," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my carefully arranged papers. "Coffee? We're fine, thanks," Michael said, settling into his chair with the confidence of someone about to inherit his kingdom. "We're excited to dive into the details." Jessica opened her portfolio with theatrical precision. "We've prepared a comprehensive handover schedule. Our consultant recommended a 60-day transition period, with you gradually reducing hours while we assume operational responsibility." I nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds very organized. Before we discuss your timeline, though, I thought you might want to review some basic information about Romano's legal structure." I pushed the first folder across the table. "These are the building ownership documents." Michael opened it casually, expecting routine paperwork. His expression shifted as he read the deed showing Elena Rodriguez as sole owner of the property housing Romano's Bistro. "This says you own the building," he said, confusion creeping into his voice. "That's correct. I inherited it from my grandmother when she died, 6 months before your father and I married. It's been in my name for 30 years. Jessica leaned over to read the documents, her confident smile faltering. "But we assumed, the business owns the building, right?" "No, the business rents from me. Here's our lease agreement." I pushed across another folder. "As you can see, it requires the landlord's personal approval for any change in business operations." Their excitement was visibly deflating as reality intruded on their assumptions. "Here are the liquor licensing requirements," I continued, sliding over the next folder. "State law requires the license holder to maintain personal oversight of all alcohol service. Transfer requires both state approval and the current license holder's written consent." Michael's face had gone pale. "But you're just stepping back from management. The licenses don't need to change. Actually, reducing my involvement to the level you've described would violate the licensing terms. I'm required to be physically present for compliance inspections, staff training oversight, and inventory management." Jessica frantically flipped through their transition documents, clearly searching for something that addressed these complications. "Our consultant didn't mention any of this," she said weakly. "Your consultant probably assumed you understood the basic legal structure," I replied gently. "Here are the supplier contracts." I pushed over the largest folder. "Most of our specialty distributors have personal guarantee clauses. Giuseppe's Imports, Romano Family Wines, Artisan Bread Company, they all extended credit and favorable terms based on my personal relationship and creditworthiness." Michael stared at the contracts as if they were written in a foreign language. "These can't be transferred?" "Not without my written consent and the supplier's approval. Most would require new credit applications, probably at less favorable terms." The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of pages turning as they absorbed the magnitude of their miscalculation. "Mom," Michael said finally, his voice small, "we had no idea it was this complicated." "I know," I said softly. "That's exactly the problem." The silence in the dining room stretched until Jessica finally broke it, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "There has to be a way around this. You can sign transfer documents, right? Assign the licenses to Michael?" I leaned back in my chair, studying their faces. The confident couple who had planned my retirement 48 hours ago now looked like students who had just discovered they'd been studying for the wrong exam. "Jessica, these aren't simple transfers. The liquor license alone requires state approval, background checks, financial verification. The process takes 6 to 8 months. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he rifled through the supplier contracts. What about the staff? Surely we can manage day-to-day operations while the paperwork gets sorted out. Let's ask Sophia, I said, turning to my assistant manager, who had been quietly observing from behind the bar. Sophia, would you feel comfortable working under management that couldn't legally operate the restaurant? Sophia stepped forward, her loyalty evident in every word. Elena, you've been my boss for 25 years. You've supported my family through every crisis. I go where you go. The color drained from Jessica's face. But we're family too. We're not trying to hurt anyone. Hurt anyone? Sophia's voice sharpened. You planned Elena's retirement party before asking Elena. You hired a consultant to strategize removing her from the business she built. How is that not hurtful? Michael stood abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking the street where Romano's food truck had first parked 30 years ago. This is insane. We're trying to help you, Mom. You're 60 years old, working 16-hour days. Don't you want to rest? 58, I corrected gently. And I'll rest when I choose to rest, not when you decide it's convenient for your timeline. He spun around, frustration finally breaking through his polite facade. So what happens now? You keep working until you drop dead in the kitchen? The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was the moment I had been preparing for since that first overheard phone conversation about operational control. I stood and walked to the wall where our community awards hung. Chamber of Commerce recognition, neighborhood appreciation plaques, newspaper clippings, documenting Romano's role in local charity events. 25 years of building something larger than profit margins. Michael, do you know why Giuseppe's Imports gives us their best prices? I asked, pointing to a photo of me shaking hands with Giuseppe Sr. at a trade show 15 years ago. Because we're good customers? Because when Giuseppe's son was arrested for DUI 10 years ago, I wrote a character reference letter that helped him keep his driver's license. Because when Giuseppe Sr. was in the hospital with COVID, I sent meals to his family every day for 3 weeks. I moved to another photo. Romano's staff serving free meals at the community center during the 2020 lockdowns. Do you know why the health inspector always gives us advance notice of visits? Michael shook his head, looking increasingly lost. Because I serve on the Restaurant Association board. Because I helped train 3 of his staff members. Because for 25 years, I've built relationships based on trust and competence, not just business transactions. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. We didn't know. You didn't ask. I returned to my seat, my voice firm but not unkind. You saw an aging woman doing busy work and assumed you could improve on 25 years of relationship building with a 60-day transition plan. Michael collapsed back into his chair, his confident posture completely deflated. What do you want us to do? I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not the entitled young man who had planned my dismissal, but the scared child who had once helped me count dinner receipts when money was tight. I want you to learn the business properly, all of it, legal requirements, relationship management, community responsibility, and I want you to ask before making decisions about my life. The transformation in the room was palpable. The confrontation I had dreaded was becoming the conversation we should have had months ago. Can we start over? Michael asked quietly. We can start honestly, I replied. 3 weeks later, I stood in the same dining room where Michael and Jessica had planned my retirement, watching them work through their first comprehensive business lesson. The table was covered with the same documents that had shattered their assumptions, but now they studied each one with genuine attention. The supplier contracts include escalation clauses tied to commodity prices. Michael read aloud, his finger tracing the fine print he had once dismissed as administrative details. That's why our food costs fluctuated last quarter. Exactly, I said, proud despite everything. Giuseppe calls me personally when pricing changes because he knows I understand the market dynamics. That relationship saved us $12,000 during the olive oil shortage. Jessica looked up from the liquor licensing manual, her expression thoughtful. The personal guarantee requirements make sense now. The state wants accountability from someone who actually understands compliance. The transformation in both of them was remarkable. The entitled confidence had been replaced by genuine curiosity about the business they had thought they already understood. Sophia appeared from the kitchen, carrying a tray of espresso for our afternoon session. "How are the students progressing?" she asked with a smile that held no trace of the worry from 3 weeks ago. "They're learning," I replied, accepting my cup. Yesterday, Michael spent 4 hours reviewing health department regulations. Jessica has been studying our social media analytics to understand customer engagement patterns. "At this rate, I might actually trust them with weekend shifts," Sophia said, her approval evident. The comment would have stung 3 weeks ago. Now Michael just nodded seriously. "I want to earn that trust. I realize how much I didn't know about what you and Mom have built here." Through the front windows, I could see Father Giuseppe approaching for his usual afternoon visit. He had been coming by more frequently since word spread about the family meeting that had nearly changed Romano's management structure. "Elena, my dear," he said, settling into his preferred booth. "How is the business education progressing?" "Slowly, but thoroughly," I replied. Michael discovered yesterday that our wine selection isn't random. Each bottle reflects relationships with specific importers who trust our recommendations. Father Giuseppe chuckled. "Your grandmother Rosa would be pleased. She always said wisdom takes time to transfer properly." Jessica looked up from her licensing manual. "Elena, can I ask you something? When you inherited the building from your grandmother, did she explain why she kept it in your name alone?" I thought about Rosa's weathered hands pointing to legal documents, her voice firm with hard-earned wisdom. She told me that women who build things should never assume others will protect what they've created. "Smart women," she said, "make sure the law reflects their work." "She was protecting you," Michael said quietly, "from people like us." The admission hung in the warm afternoon air. For weeks, I had watched my son grapple with the reality of his assumptions. The weight of plans made without consultation, the arrogance of believing inheritance meant automatic competence. "She was protecting the business," I corrected gently, "from anyone who might confuse ownership with understanding." My phone buzzed with a text from David Morales, our attorney. "Partnership paperwork ready for review when you're prepared to discuss succession planning." I showed the message to Michael and Jessica. "When you're truly ready, when you understand not just the operations but the responsibility, we can discuss your future involvement on equal terms with full transparency." Michael reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry for the surprise announcement, for the consultant, for assuming I knew better than someone who's been doing this for 25 years. I'm sorry too," Jessica added, "for treating your life's work like a corporate acquisition instead of a family legacy." I looked around the dining room where 3 generations of our neighborhood had celebrated milestones, where Sophia and I had built something larger than profit, where my grandmother's wisdom had protected everything we had created. "The business will continue," I said finally, "and someday it may be yours. But it will always require the respect it deserves." As the afternoon light streamed through Romano's windows, I felt the deep satisfaction of a woman who had protected what she built, taught what she knew, and maintained the dignity that her grandmother had insisted was worth preserving. The family business would survive, and so would the family.